Bernie is back. So Bernie is back, and he looked more reinvigorated and healthier than ever.
He looked better
to
in
me.
Any debate last night. He looked awesome.
He not, in my opinion, he not only looked awesome, he did awesome. Like, he did the best. I think this was probably his best debate performance. He was a lot more assertive, a lot more astute, a lot more just, there. And of course they asked him the stupid health question, the ageist question that Tulsi later had to go defend him on. But he still killed it. He still pivoted, and he was like, I'm great, I'm back. And then, then they, of course, had to ask Elizabeth Warren the same question, and Joe Biden. And then Tulsi that was where she was like, you shouldn't ask this question, blah, blah, blah. He established himself strongly as the working people's candidate. And he was even, doing little jokes. So let's play. I think I have a video, Johnny, of. Yes. He had a little lighthearted moment with Joe Biden here.
The matter is you have Russia influencing and trying to break up NATO. What does the president do? He says, I believe Vladimir Putin. I believe Vladimir Putin. I don't believe our intelligence community.
I'm Vladimir Putin.
No, I'm not. But here, look.
So I want two things on that. Yeah, it's great. It's funny. But also, Bernie and Joe Biden. I mean, people hate Joe Biden, right? Like, and people were destroying Tulsi Gabbard because she refused to or didn't really go on attack Joe Biden the way Kamala Harris did. Where is everybody being upset at Bernie Sanders for having a joking moment with Joe Biden? I just want to point that out because I love pointing out people's double standards. I absolutely love doing that. And this is it. They're all working, in the government. They're all going to be interacting with each other. Even if they disagree or really dislike each other, they're going to be interacting like this. And so we need to stop, looking at that as much as we are so hyper focused on it as like what we look at the legislation they pass. Because I've also seen Bernie go at it with Joe Biden, extremely, it goes toe to toe. You know what I mean?
Last night they had a moment.
Absolutely,
well.
absolutely.
So the smears you're talking about. What smear were you talking about?
The smear where they brought up his heart condition. So they had been ignoring Bernie Sanders pretty much. He had Amy Klobuchar had more talking time than Bernie Sanders. Okay. Yeah. So they brought that up and then they silenced him again. And they went back to silencing him. And then Johnny, can you go to my Twitter? I didn't put it in here, but can you go to my Twitter real quick? I want you to see it's like a minute plus long of Bernie Sanders talking about the billionaires, and Tom Steyer is the one that Tom Steyer is the one that right there got caught off guard because she talks about you're the only billionaire here.
You said, quoting you, Senator, billionaires should not exist. Is the goal of your plan to tax billionaires out of existence?
When you have 500,000 Americans sleeping out on the street today, when you have 87 million people uninsured or underinsured, when you got hundreds of thousands of kids who cannot afford to go to college and millions struggling with the oppressive burden of student debt, and then you also have 3 people owning more wealth than the bottom half of American society. That is a moral and economic outrage. And the truth is, we cannot afford to continue this level of income and wealth inequality, and we cannot afford a billionaire class whose greed and corruption has been at war with the working families of this country for 45 years. So if you're asking me, do I think we should demand that the wealthy start paying, the wealthiest, top 0.1%, start paying their fair share of taxes so we can create a nation and a government that works for all of us? Yes, that's exactly what I believe.
There you go.
Thank you, Senator.
And he said specifically in this Times article, he also said, I'm getting a little bit tired, I must say, of people defending a system which is dysfunctional, which is cruel. The issue is whether the Democratic Party has the guts to stand up to the healthcare industry. He was really strong on the healthcare industry, and we did mention that yesterday.
Yeah.
He's probably the strongest one on healthcare. But let's move on to Tulsi real quick. So Tulsi Gabbard is the candidate that was kind of controversial last night for a lot of people. She was the one that tried to go after Warren. She kind of schooled Buttigieg, and she also called out the New York Times and CNN in a very big way, right? And Jonny, can we show real quick the updated times? I have the graph here with the updated times for all of the candidates. And so we can see that Gabbard had about 8 minutes at the end, Steyer 7, and he's brand new. Then we were looking at Sanders, who had 13 minutes, right? But above him, you have Beto O'Rourke, Klobuchar, Biden, and Warren. Warren had 22 minutes. Then it came Biden, and then Biden, Klobuchar, and O'Rourke and Bernie were pretty close. But the fact that Amy Klobuchar, who's pulling at 2%, had as much time as
negative 2%.
Yeah, and that's only because she's being propped up.
Yeah.
I guarantee you she's pulling less than Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah.
Had so much more time, or as much time as Bernie Sanders, is ridiculous to me.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous to me. How?
Yeah.
Bernie is
O'Rourke
like,
too.
Yeah. And all he was saying was platitudes, and every time he talked, we would just pass out.
Yeah. I think that Klobuchar and O'Rourke need to go really after this debate. I'm saying Beto just, once again, it just says nothing by speaking all the time. Now, in all fairness, Elizabeth Warren was attacked by her establishment friends in the beginning. So she did have a lot of time responding back, and the moderators gave her time to respond back. But the thing that really I found crazy yesterday was that they allowed the establishment Democrats to go back and forth. But when Tulsi Gabbard asked her a serious question, they went to commercial break quickly.
Exactly. So let's show that pasta. And I wrote this: love her, hate her, or confused on where to put her. You have to admit the moderators were protecting Warren, number one. Number two, Gabbard was being silenced. And number three, this is wrong, regardless of how you feel about Tulsi Gabbard.
I am prepared to do this job, to fulfill this responsibility as Commander-in-Chief on day one. I'd like to ask our other candidates this question. I'd like to start with Senator Warren. What her experience and background is.
I'm sorry, thank you. We're going to take another break now. The CNN New York Times debate live from Otterbein University here in Ohio.
And look at her face. She's like, really? Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Screw you
And why
guys.
didn't they come back to that after the debate? Like, if you were running an honest debate, we're returning from the break right now. Senator Warren, would you like to respond to Congressman Gabbard on why, and tell her why you have the ability as Commander-in-Chief, the knowledge as Commander-in-Chief, to be the president, and let her respond for that. But they immediately went away from it, went on to the next subject, and you can see her smiling. It's like, oh, everybody else gets to attack her on BS. But when I ask her a serious question, we're talking about Commander-in-Chief. It's just swept under the rug, proving that New York Times and CNN are a bunch of jerks.
I mean, she proved it. And Pasta, what do you think about her little feud with Buttigieg?
Well, that was great. You got to watch Buttigieg's face here on this whatnot. He couldn't answer the question. And this
fam.
Buttigieg, whatever. Buttigieg. Whatever the case, Buttigieg, he's got to go too as well. But this was a very strong moment too. And to see, we'll get to it, some other people in the independent media or mainstream media, whatever you want to call them.
I call them mainstream.
Tagging on to this. Let's first watch the moment when it happened, and we'll dive into this.
Well, respectfully, Congresswoman, I think that is dead wrong. The slaughter going on in Syria is not a consequence of American presence. It's a consequence of a withdrawal and a betrayal by this president of American allies and American values. Look, I didn't think we should have gone to Iraq in the first place. I think we need to get out of Afghanistan. But it's also the case that a small number of specialized special operations forces and intelligence capabilities were the only thing that stood between that part of Syria and what we're seeing now, which is the beginning of a genocide and the resurgence of ISIS.
Yeah, absolutely. So really what you're saying, Mayor Pete, is that you would continue to support having U.S. troops in Syria for an indefinite period of time to continue this regime change war that has caused so many refugees to flee Syria, that you would continue to have our country involved in a war that has undermined our national security. You would continue this policy of the U.S. actually providing arms and support to terrorist groups in Syria, like Al-Qaeda, HTS, al-Nusra, and others, because they are the ones who have been the ground force in this regime change war.
I've never
That's
seen him
really
like that.
what
He's
you're
like
saying.
sucking back his neck.
No, you can embrace, or you can put an end to endless war without embracing Donald
Will
Trump's
you end the
policy
regime
as you're
change
doing.
war is the question.
What we are doing
What is an endless war if it's not yet another regime change war?
Please allow him to respond.
What we are doing, or what we were doing in Syria, was keeping our word. Part of what makes it possible for the United States to get people to put their lives on the line to back us up is the idea that we will back them up too. When I was deployed, not just the Afghan National Army forces, but the janitors put their lives on the line just by working with U.S. forces. I would have a hard time today looking an Afghan civilian or soldier in the eye.
He never was on the
after
field.
what just happened over there. And it is undermining the honor of our soldiers.
All right.
You take away the honor of our soldiers, you might as well go after their body armor next. This president has betrayed American values. Our credibility is in tattered. I will restore.
Okay, so he can talk over
Yeah.
all the time, and please let him talk, Tulsi,
Yeah.
or we're gonna cut you off. But please let him talk. I mean, you can see, and this mother, oh my God, he irritates the hell out
It was
of
a
me.
pack of lies too, as well. He was talking about we have to keep our word, we have to go with honor, we have to keep special forces there. No, the only thing that's fueling the massacre, the genocide, is our presence. Bottom line, it started as a regime change war. We wanted Assad out so we can put a pipeline through there. We'll talk about it later. Everything else, and we funded both sides, fam.
Yeah.
We gave al-Nusra, Al-Qaeda, ISIS weapons so they can do what? Kill the Kurds then? Kill Assad and Damascus forces. And then when Donald Trump came into play, he went to the Kurds and used the Kurds to get rid of ISIS and Idlib on the borders with Turkey. But then Turkey said, there's no way we're going to let the Kurds go there. We've been funding people on all sides. I put up a tweet yesterday. We have to get out of there, end our presence, period. Bottom line, guys like Joe Biden, guys like Pete Buttigieg, they'll keep the war going. They'll keep the war machine rolling, and they said it. And they're trying to make it about this president when it wasn't his war. He didn't start the war. Operation Sycamore Timber. We'll talk about it later.
Yeah, Pasta's going to go into that later. And I just want to point out when Tulsi called CNN and New York Times to their face, I put it in the thing. This is extremely brave of her because this is the whole point of her going to the debate, was her calling out CNN and the New York Times to their face. Because the reality is that they proved her point last night. They absolutely proved her right. And now this is why she's the #1 Google candidate, most Googled candidate from last night. Again, every single time. Sure, maybe you'll find Assad next to her name, but at least people are trying to find out what she's doing. This is why we're here to, regardless of how you feel, if you agree with her on issue X or Y and Z, she is being smeared, she is being targeted, and this is her calling out the establishment.
Well, we've got to understand the reality of the situation there, which is that the slaughter of the Kurds being done by Turkey is yet another negative consequence of the regime change war that we've been waging in Syria. Donald Trump has the blood of the Kurds on his hand, but so do many of the politicians in our country from both parties who have supported this ongoing regime change war in Syria that started in 2011. Along with many in the mainstream media who have been championing and cheerleading this regime change war. Not only that, but New York Times and CNN have also smeared veterans like myself for calling for an end to this regime change war. Just 2 days ago, the New York Times put out an article saying that I'm a Russian asset and an Assad apologist and all these different smears. This morning, a CNN commentator said on national television that I'm an asset of Russia. Completely despicable. As president, I will end these regime change wars by doing two things: ending the draconian sanctions that are really a modern day siege, the likes of which we are seeing Saudi Arabia wage against Yemen, that have caused tens and thousands of Syrian civilians to die and to starve. And I would make sure that we stop supporting terrorists like Al-Qaeda in Syria, who've been the ground force in this ongoing regime change war.
So, I mean, nobody else has had the guts to say it. She said sanctions. She talked about the sanctions.
Isn't it great
specifically.
that she said it on the show?
Yeah.
We were hearing this. I was sitting where Tulsi was when she was asked that question about sanctions. And she said, you know what? There's not even a vice within the United States to explain what the sanctions do. So she does her homework and she knows what's going on. She's been saying unequivocally every single time, Iran, let's get rid of the sanctions. Russia, let's get rid of the sanctions. Venezuela, let's get rid of, lift these sanctions.
You have to be stupid to be Pete Buttigieg or any of these people trying to. This is where Tulsi shines. You can criticize her on other things like domestic policy. You might not agree with her on her stance on abortion, let's say. But when it comes to foreign policy, this is her area, and so you have to you have to either be an idiot or you have to know so much that you're gonna try to school. I mean, she's a veteran, and the fact is, if anybody else were smeared like that, people would be. Imagine if Buttigieg was smeared as a Russian asset.
Or
oh
Warren.
my God, or Warren. Oh my
Forget
God,
about
that's
it.
so despicable. How dare you? She's a woman of color, and nobody ever talks about that. Nobody ever talks about her being a veteran and how she's smeared.
Mr. Orochi, $1.99 super chat. TYT smeared Tulsi segment with Warren. Yes,
we're going to touch on that right now.
Ungi, my boy, Mike Ungi. Take the Jets this week. The money line, they're plus 300. At least PD Boy said respectfully before showing his utter ignorance. That raises his grade from an F to a D. To me, it raises it from an F to a D minus.
Yeah.
And we have a $20 super chat from Learned Hand. How you doing, Learned Hand? Where were you last night? Keep up the great work, fam.
Thanks,
I
fam.
went to a Pac Bernie rally last night to watch the debates. The CNN coverage was so worthless, most people, including myself, spent more time networking and drinking than watching.
Oh, trust me. I had to have a glass of wine last night after all the BS.
Jay Bird says for $5, and that was a $20 from Learn Hand. Thank you so
Chuck.
much.
Thank you.
$20 Chuck. Great coverage. Thank you all for the hard work. Shout out to the Sane Progressive. Well, you know, the Sane Progressive called the Ro Khanna stuff before anybody else did. She said he was a donkey and a establishment hack, and she was absolutely right.
I don't think he's an establishment hack. I don't think Ro Khanna. I think Ro Khanna has good intentions. I think
he's got some good policies.
I think
but
on
his
foreign
intentions, I'm always
policy,
watching.
I don't agree with him at all. But
So-
I think he's got good intentions. Fam, just because you have a lot to say
Yes,
on
yes.
Syria, I just want to touch on how Anna and Emma both smeared Tulsi last night. They completely turned it around and attacked her instead of just, like, I don't know, being fair. So also Anna doesn't know anything about foreign policy. And this isn't, just to attack Anna. This is the fact that she's spreading misinformation. So again, what got us there in the first place was going after Assad in Syria. Gabbard mentioned that. This has been happening for 7 years. We went over this last night. It is absolutely regime change. We are part of it. She needs to do some research because this is what Anna Kasparian said. Gabbard is lying. U.S. troops in northern Syria weren't there for a regime change war. Quote, they were there to deter Turkish aggression against Kurdish allies until there was a safe zone created. Her dishonesty here is gross. I don't know what if Tulsi stole Anna's firstborn or if Tulsi did something terrible to Anna.
No.
But I mean, the vitriol keeps coming.
it is,
And hashtag Democratic debate. This woman got 31,000 likes for this. As a journalist, as an influencer, as someone that people rely on, when you spread misinformation, I hold you entirely responsible for that. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
What is disgusting and gross is what you are doing, spreading this misinformation. And it's not about liking Tulsi or not. It's about the truth. It's about the fact that this is the reality.
Well, you got to put Ungi's fucking comment up there. Can I read that, please? Considering you obviously tweeted that in between cocaine snorts funded by Katzenberg's cash, it's surprisingly false and articulate. You do know you do a really good job of acting like you know things while drowning in your own ignorance. Now be a good little tool and pass the straw to Emma.
And pass the straw she did.
I mean, so these people, let me tell you something, not only everybody on that stage other than Tulsi really knows about foreign policy.
Right.
Especially when it comes to Syria.
Yeah.
But, the TYT repeating this stuff, they want to act like they can start the situation right now. This was, like you said, fam, 7 years ago. It was a regime change war. We funded all sides. You can't just pick up and say, oh, they're here to stop the aggression from the Turks. No, they were there for a regime change war. The thing that is fueling the massacre, the bloodshed in Syria is our presence. Get out. Unequivocally, get out. The only point that we're saying is that Donald Trump isn't getting out. He just moved out of the way. Okay? And Tulsi pointed that out.
And it's wrong for him to do that. Yeah.
Get out.
So we really need to get out.
Completely.
But they don't know what they're talking about. So Emma said that so Emma, of course, she passed the torch. She ranked Tulsi 11.
Pass the straw.
Yeah. Next to Kamala Harris. So she ranked Tulsi all the way at the bottom. See, and so I wrote, the woman was number one Googled candidate, got one of the least amounts of speaking times, and still had the best sound bites, which she did. This is why we're going over them now.
Yeah.
The best foreign policy, hands down, as a Bernie supporter, I still stand by the fact that she answered the foreign policy issues there the best and managed to call out the New York Times and CNN to their face. I can say Warren did okay, and I think Warren, perception-wise, did okay.
Yeah.
But you can't hide your hatred for Gabbard. And this is a problem. Like, you can think, you don't like her, but hey, she did okay. For instance, I think Elizabeth Warren did okay, mainly because she was hiding behind Bernie Sanders. And if she said, Senator Sanders and I, one more time, I was going to throw something, pasta. I was getting so irritated at her using Bernie to prop herself up. And then, of course, they go attack her for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And they make her look better. They made her look better, which is why I would put her maybe fifth or fourth.
I was going to make a tweet and says, Elizabeth Warren is mentioning Bernie more than I mentioned Fee, which is awful lot. Me and Fam and I.
More than you mentioned Fam. Let's be clear here. Let me be very clear.
And let's take our time with this stuff too, because we'll do the Damascus stuff. We'll open up the show tomorrow and start with it because we don't want to rush with that stuff. There's a lot of stuff. But while we're going over this too as well, and we're talking about this stuff, can you also just go to my Twitter real quick? Because I made a little post of a 15-second video with a man from Syria who can explain it. But go ahead into this as we're putting this up.
Okay, so I just want to read a tweet from Ben Norton real quick. He said,
first one, yeah.
No, Gabbard is correct. The U.S. was illegally military occupying the northeast third of Syria, where 90% of oil production took place. It's also the fertile breadbasket. The U.S. was holding Syria's oil and wheat hostage as a weapon to destabilize the government.
Absolutely.
Why? Because we wanted Assad out.
Yes.
We even helped fund these fake chemical weapons attacks.
And guess.
These are true.
Yes. And guess who we used to get the oil? Turkey. That was okay, though. We were doing that. We were funding Turkey to kill the PKK, which are the Kurds inside Turkey. That's okay. And Turkey has said this millions of times, too, as well, when Donald Trump got in, is that they weren't going to allow the Kurds to come to the borders to unite with the PKK, which are the Kurds inside of Syria. So they told them, don't go into that zone. And at first, when we were funding ISIS and Al-Qaeda, they took over those towns on the border. Then Donald Trump came in, funded the Kurds, pushed them out, ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and put the Kurds in, knowing that there would be a problem down the road. So that's why Donald Trump has some blame to bear as well.
Absolutely. They all do. But this has been ongoing for a while. That is the point.
Can we listen to a Syrian man over here, too, as well? I found this. Sophia, the Russian bot, put this up. I took a little clip, and you can also go over there and watch the whole video, because this guy was being very critical of Kyle Kalinski's reporting on Syria,
because
which
it was
he sucked
wrong.
About. He was wrong.
Entirely wrong.
He was entirely wrong. And here's a man from Syria, a 15-second loop. Go to my our Twitter and check it out. Go ahead.
The reason that you have this situation today is because of Western imperialist intervention in the Middle East. So don't tell me that the solution to imperialism is more imperialism. No, you've done enough. Get out. That's it.
That's it. You've done enough. Get the hell out.
And that was what Tulsi was trying to get them to say. And and remember, we don't have the clip, but she asked Warren the same thing.
Yeah.
So are you gonna do? And they were like, they did not let the woman. And I know Tulsi did her homework, because the way she was coming at this, she was very clear about what she wanted to attack, because that is her strong point. I believe that to be president, you should take a test on foreign policy. To be a journalist, you should have to take a test on understanding foreign policy, because the majority of the freaking journalists and the pundits out there, even the quote unquote progressive ones, have absolutely no idea about foreign policy. They assume, they take the talking points that are given to them and whatever's most popular and trending, and they go with it. And unfortunately, sometimes you have to go against the grain. Unfortunately, you have to accept that we are to blame for a lot of these issues. And I can say that as somebody that loves this country, because Tulsi is a true patriot. She's a veteran. She has fought. People have died. People she's, been with have died in these wars. And so there's no better person to talk about that than a veteran. But if you're like Pete Buttigieg, who was a CIA asset, actually, and who actually didn't actually go to the field, he was actually working. He never actually touched the outside of the field, because I did a lot of research on him.
Yeah.
You're not going to have that same mentality. And you know, and really, can you imagine him just facing Tulsi? Tulsi's like,
Yeah.
she's like a strong woman.
And let's not forget, Pete Buttigieg once said in a town hall, we can target sanctions. No, you can't. The sanctions going to hurt the poor people, not going to hurt the people within the government. So he said target sanctions. He's talking about keeping troops there. This guy is not a progressive. He does not know about foreign policy enough, and it's a shame because he was in the service. Who did the best last night, though? I think
Bernie Sanders did the best.
Yes.
In my opinion, he had the strongest. Like, I mean, he was on fire, Bernie.
Yes.
He was like calling everybody out. He was like, "We're gonna do that." He
Yes.
attacked the billionaires. He was pretty much saying, "Eat the rich," and they silenced him so much every single time. After he said those things, you notice that they silenced him. When he not attacked, but he was attacking the billionaires after the Steyer comment, they silenced him as well. Also, I want to quickly, before we go on to Yang, Johnny, I skipped the numbers. So there were really good numbers that came out for Bernie last night. This reporter got directly from the campaign that the Trump campaign reported $1,056,000, $126 individual donations in quarter 3. The campaign received $1.4 million in donations in the third quarter. And the Sanders campaign said, we are now officially the only campaign to receive more donations than Trump in the third quarter. This is big. Donald Trump usually out fundraises everybody. This is the first time that anybody outraised Donald Trump. And this is the quickest fundraising for Bernie. And Daniel Marantz, who's another journalist, I believe, said that Sanders raised $625,000 on Tuesday, ending at midnight. The majority of it from 40,000 contributions, and the majority of it, at 35% of it, was from 9 to 10 p.m. And when I tweeted about this, I said that was probably the time when CNN was being biased assholes, and people were like, donate. And a lot of these donations were $2, $2.70.
And remember that Donald Trump is the only one running on the right now. I mean, there was a couple talks, so he gets all the money from all the Republicans on the right that are interested in donating. Bernie still has to compete fundraising-wise with 36 other candidates. Is it 36?
No.
I don't know. Every single time the people on that stage.
I don't know
12,
how many.
But, there's 4 of the people who weren't on the debates that are still running and stuff. Now, I said yesterday that Bernie Sanders definitely did win. I thought Tulsi Gabbard did well and stuff. But we expected them. They went from here to here. There's a guy who I thought was very, very low, who made a very big jump last night.
Yes.
And I said, this is it for him. This is do or die. And he's got to come out, not just with his policies or try to explain his principles. He's got to come out with energy. He's got to connect with the audience. And I thought Andrew Yang did that last night. I thought he did well for himself last night.
He did. And
you have a few things that you put up that you would like to talk about when it comes to the Yang gang.
Yeah, so Andrew Yang, he did pretty well. And he said also that He made a really good point. He said we need to decriminalize opiates for personal use. We need to let the country know this is not a personal failing. This was a systemic government failing. And he's right. We needed to decriminalize these things instead of treating them as crimes, treat them as rehabilitation. And he made a really good point on that. Let's see if we
let's
can
not watch
play
the
it.
video because we ain't got much time. But we got the tweet up. So what else did he say that
he
was really
also
good?
said it's a problem. He was talking.
This is a good one right here.
Let me see. He was talking about, I think, against Elizabeth Warren. He was talking about a more nuanced view on the economy. And although he's still a capitalist, he actually was able to point out a few things that were a little bit more nuanced. And although I tend to agree more left of Yang, I think it's interesting to have this point of view, because he was basically talking about the wealth tax and how, Elizabeth Warren is for a wealth tax, Bernie Sanders is for a wealth tax. He's saying no. And this is my problem with Yang, is that even though he understands economic from a business perspective, it's also, he's still a capitalist and he's still part of this system, and he doesn't believe in a wealth tax in corporations, which is a problem. I don't know if you want to. Well,
the whole thing is I just want to say that these are the points where, a UBI is a great idea. We talked about it, but there's other things that need to happen, other than the laws that need to come into place, other restrictions that have to happen for a UBI to work. In other words, we have to have rent control. Andrew Yang ain't for rent control and stuff. So if we have a UBI, they can funnel all that money into who? The landlords.
Right.
Okay, you also need what? A jobs program too as well. You know what I'm saying? You need all these things to happen for a UBI to work. We got to have restrictions for when a UBI works. But it was a great point that was mentioned last night that, well, okay, you have a federal jobs program, but you don't have a UBI. You don't have not a UBI, a
Federal Jobs Guarantee.
No.
Rent control. Minimum wage.
It's a universal basic. It's the $1,000 a month. If you don't have a UBI, what do you do to the mothers at home that aren't out there working, whatnot and stuff? So I think that that Tulsi kind of jumped on that and said, yeah, she is for a UBI, but she's also for a minimum wage. She's also for control.
Right.
So she's for the parameters that make a UBI work.
Right.
Where Yang ain't for a minimum wage.
Right.
He ain't for rent control. So that's really a problem.
And I know we have to go, Johnny, but just quickly play this. He shines on automation is where Yang shines. It's the second one where saying this is a rules problem is ignoring the reality that Americans see around us every single day. Just quickly.
Senator Warren, I've been talking to Americans around the country about automation, and they're smart. They see what's happening around them. Their Main Street stores are closing. They see a self-serve kiosk in every McDonald's, every grocery store, every CVS. Driving a truck is the most common job in 29 states, including this one. 3.5 million truck drivers in this country, and my friends in California are piloting self-driving trucks. What is that going to mean for the 3.5 million truckers or the 7 million Americans who work in truck stops, motels, and diners that rely upon the truckers getting out and having a meal? Saying this is a rules problem is ignoring the reality that Americans see around us every single day.
And he's right. He's absolutely right.
That.
But I mean, I think he's absolutely right. And because you can't fight automation. It's going to happen. It's already happening. I saw with Johnny an entire documentary on it where in Florida where the truckers are already they're already cutting their hours because there are self-driving trucks and they're testing them out. And of course, these companies are going to save money and increase their profits by doing that. But this is exactly why, when you know this, you need regulations on these corporations. You need to get that money back out into the people and not just kept at the top. So while I agree with Yang's, breath of fresh air ideas and how he's revitalizing them in a way that's understandable and appealing to a lot of people, I think you need protections for the working class because otherwise they're going to be exploited and it's going to be the slave labor. This is why I side with Bernie. I think Tulsi has a little bit of both. I think she's like in the middle of that. She has a little bit of both. And I think it's important to be open to listening to this and seeing, okay, I agree with you on that, but this is why I don't think that's going to work for the working people, etc.
Yeah.
So,
well, automation is a problem for the future, but I don't think it's the main problem. I think that Elizabeth Warren was right when she said that a lot of jobs that were sent overseas to her trade policies really hurt the American economy. We have to factor that in because a lot of people, because automation isn't there yet. It's in the future. It's coming, but I don't see a kiosk at every McDonald's. I see that one McDonald's. You know what I'm saying? And every single time you see that thing, it has a problem. Now, as far as self-automated vehicles, we're going to have to deal with the fact that one of these self-automated vehicles kills somebody where we already have an incident. There goes your lawsuits. They're going to have to pay for that one way or the other. So I don't think we're there in automation yet. I think it is part of the equation, but I think both Elizabeth Warren and Yang were both right and wrong on this situation. Automation is a problem for workers in the future, but it's supposed to be a good thing, which we could discuss in a beautiful socialist society, what human beings should be doing. But once again, there were thousands and thousands of hundreds of thousands of jobs that were shipped overseas because they took advantage of cheap slave labor.
Okay, so I want to point out something, Pasa, real quick, because Elizabeth Warren was wrong when she said trade policies are it. She got fact-checked. She said the principal reason for losing jobs has been bad trade policy. Economists mostly blame those job losses on automation and robots, not trade deals. But
some economists.
But the fact is a little bit different. So let me see if I can find it here when I read it. Oh, God. I don't know if we have time, but...
No, we don't have time.
I'll bring it up next time, but she's wrong on that. She's not entirely accurate. It's a combination of things, like Pasta said, but I think automation isn't the number one problem. I think it's a very big problem, and I agree with Elizabeth. It is trade policies too, but it's not just that. She said it was a number one problem, and the point is, it's not. So
it is once again, like when it comes to Andrew Yang, he gets it right some of the time, but he doesn't get it right all the time. He gets a piece of it right. You know what I'm saying? Like he got a piece of it right with his UBI because of the things. Automation is something we have to look for in the future, but the trade policies did hurt us 20 years ago when they were signed. And who made all the money? All the corporate owners, all the top of the food chain, all the elites, all the people who were up there. While everybody else down below got smacked in the ass. And this whole time, these people can be making an honest living, sweeping, doing janitor stuff, the small things that we used to give the people within our society, like my grandfather, who swept the docks.
But that's not going to work anymore.
It's not going to work in the future, but it should have been working for the last 30 years. So let's say hi to, and that's just a difference of opinion. We'll go over more.
Yeah.
Let's say hi to some people before we get out of here on our YouTube